he's raving about this woman who inherited money from the Dixie Cup company and put out these. And I listened to him. I bought a couple of their
Dora
albums.
Hall.
They're horrible. Yeah. They are horrible records.
Hello and welcome to episode 4 of the Who Cares Anyway podcast. My guest on this episode is Mark Prindle from markprindle.com. Now, a little backstory. I first encountered Mark Prindle's writing in the late 90s as I was getting acquainted with this newfangled invention called the internet. At the time, I was a student at UNC Chapel Hill in North Carolina and a DJ at WXYC, the student-run radio station there on campus. What I did not realize as I was sitting there reading Mark Prindle's reviews in one of the computer labs on campus was that Mark Prindle himself had been a UNC student and WXYC DJ. And as I gradually learned over the years, he was friends with, or at least contemporary with, the same people who first introduced me to things like Neil Hamburger and Carolina and Secret Chiefs and Amarillo Records when I was at XYC in the late 90s. So both directly and indirectly, Mark Prindle has been an influential figure. So when it came time to seek out endorsement blurbs for the book, he was the very first person I reached out to, and I figured if he were so inclined, it would only be fitting to get a quote from Mark Prindle, and he certainly came through in his unique, dare I say, inimitable style. So thank you very much to Mark Prindle for that. Now, this interview that you're about to hear in a somewhat edited form was actually the first one I conducted for this podcast series, but it turns out that because it was the first one, I really didn't know what I was doing in terms of being an interview host, at least in an audio format. And long story short, I just talked way too much. And I guess I was excited to talk to Mark Prindle after all these years, but I just talked way too much, and before I knew it, the time was up. So I thought, how can I make the best of this situation? And I started splicing in some little audio clips, and one thing led to another. And this episode wound up turning into, well, it's still an interview, but it's also something of a montage and an homage to that little slice of time in the late 90s when sort of pre-internet underground culture was coming online and people like me were discovering things as these new doors were being opened by the internet. And at the same time, although we couldn't realize it at the time, this world that we had grown up in was gradually beginning to sort of fade into the past. With all that said, I'll get out of the way and let us proceed with the interview / montage / whatever you want to call it with the one and only Mark Prindle. I was looking, I was like, when did he start his website? And then I realized it's right there at the top, 1996.
Yeah.
1996 to 2011. And then I actually, I came across the Alt Music Chapel Hill archive. And
I was on that.
Yeah, and I think that you had must have had a different handle, but the one post that I saw, you pasted the link to the website. And you were asking for reader comments, but it was before it was markprindle.com.
So it was like geocities.com / /.
Exactly. But that's what the Amarillo website was too. You know, the Amarillo website.
They all were back then.
Were.
It was really a different era. You know, you had a / I think it was like GeoCity, Sunset Strip.
At the time, I mean, it was almost like, you know, what is this kooky internet stuff? I mean, this
right.
I would kind of make jokes about it as like for computer nerds, but what were you thinking when you started it? Did you have the idea that you were going to be doing full artist catalog?
Yeah, it started. Yeah, it started because like I said, I moved up to, you know, I've always been really interested in rock music and weird, you know, strange music. So anyway, I moved up with my brother. We were living together at the time. He was a website developer for work. And he said, if you could write a book about anything, what would you write about? And I said, I would review all the albums in my collection. And he said, you could do that with a website. And I said, I have no idea what that is. And he explained it to me, and he put together, and I think it was probably even his idea to take reader comments. I don't remember for sure, but so So that's when so it started off with me doing the writing, and he would post the stuff, and then he showed me how to just cut and paste the different HTML things. And so I started doing it myself. And I did from the beginning plan it to be the full discography. I didn't I didn't like reading in like Rolling Stone magazine, someone would say terrible things about an album, and you'd go, well, this doesn't mean anything to me because I don't know what their taste is. I don't know what they thought of the last album, or AC/DC's Ball Breaker came out and it got all these really positive reviews. And I think the album sucks. I really like AC/DC, but that album is a shitty album. So it just made me wonder, like, why? Why would they give it a 5 out of 5? Had they heard the other albums? So I really wanted a place where people could read about every album by one band and, get a sense for what my taste was to see if they might like the stuff I'm recommending. And I think we probably did like maybe 12 bands before maybe 16 bands before we posted it, but we didn't just put it up with like one band.
Okay, I remember
curious. That. Yeah.
Okay,
AC/DC was the first band I did.
That was going to be one of my questions.
Yeah. But then years would pass, and at some point I was reviewing bootlegs, and some crazy guy sent me about 20 AC/DC bootlegs. So now there's a ton of AC/DC bootlegs reviewed on that page, and I don't know. The whole thing just got ridiculous because with my OCD making me review an album every single day, and then my OCD made me review every EP and every live album and then for a while bootlegs. So it's just a mess of stuff, written at different times. So you'll get like AC/DC, you'll go through, and when I first started the website, I just would write about every album I listened to. I would just, on paper. This is before I was typing them in. I would write on paper. So I didn't write that much. So AC/DC is like, album, paragraph, album, paragraph, album, paragraph, album, paragraph. And now between all those, you get like bootleg, 6 paragraphs, bootleg, 6 paragraphs. It's like, so it looks ridiculous. And I realize I'm rambling, but I just wanted to point out that the other reviews aren't very good. But,
No, no, I mean, I can barely, I have some collections of things or, clips of things, but thankfully a lot of stuff I wrote, was not, like for the Spectator Weekly, they pulled it here in Raleigh.
Oh, yeah. A friend of mine somehow found online, I don't know how he did this. He found online an article I wrote for the Daily Tar Heel, or the diversions section of the Daily Tar Heel, about some play, like a version of a Shakespeare play or something that I have no recollection at all of writing. He sent it to me and I read it and I was like, it sounds like I don't give a shit. Why did I do this? And he said, that's what I liked about it. It sounds like you had no interest in doing the article. So I guess it was something I was told to write, so I did, but it's out there somewhere. So presumably the record reviews I wrote in college are out there somewhere too.
Look, I don't want to be filming this and you don't want to be watching this, so let's just get this shit over with. I'm Mark Prindle, and today we're talking about dynamic Denton, Texas.
Now, mark my words, son.
Because I was going to ask what the first one was, because I didn't know if you started with like one.
Yeah, I don't remember what the other first ones were, but I probably started with my favorite band, so it was probably AC/DC, the Ramones, the stuff I knew really well, like Led Zeppelin and Pink Floyd, because I listened to it so much in middle school and high school. But yeah, Rolling Stones, probably Beatles, the easy stuff.
That's not easy to. There's a lot of it, but I have a not clear memory, but I have a memory of being in the computer lab at Venable Hall, the chemistry building, because that's where I had to go to the computer lab to go on the internet, because I certainly didn't have a computer in my dorm.
Right. Yeah.
But reading about the Melvins. And that would have probably been 97, but I didn't make the connection. Maybe at some point I came across that you had been at WXYC, but there I am in the computer lab there reading these reviews, and so I didn't connect that you were XYC, or that we knew a lot of the same people that I had people like Franz, and eventually I read your Thinking Fellers review, and you mentioned, I was going to ask you to tell it, but you can't tell it any better than the way it's written, where
that was great. I'll go ahead, I can tell you that though. Franz was like just always beyond cool in terms of music. He was always listening to the stuff that was out there, stuff I'd never heard of. I don't know. Anyway, so we were at the Sneaking Fellows show, and they played this song, and it was great. It was like this like spaghetti western music, and it was just amazing, and it was so good. And it got to the end, and I was like, wow, what was that? And Franz looked back and said, oh, that was, what was it? It was something by
Morricone, like
yeah, it was
Fistful of
Morricone.
Dollars or something.
Yeah, Fistful of Dollars. And he was like, and I was like, oh, okay. And then like a few songs later, they played I Dig a Pony by the Beatles, and it got to the end, and he was like, what was that? It was the Beatles. So I finally, for once, I felt like, yay, I knew something that Franz did. Did he tell you we played in a band for a very short period of time?
No.
Oh, it didn't work out because I was basically because I was too goofy. I was a band called Lima. It was me and this drummer named Dan Radloff, who was really into AMREP. And I was really into AMREP too, but we didn't really have any clue what we were doing. I would just write songs. And anyway, so Franz was in the band for a very short period of time. But we did a show where I used to be, I'm goofy, but I used to be really goofy. So I did this show and I was super goofy, dressed up stupid and everything. And I wasn't really paying attention to the band. And so Franz got mad and he was like, look, I'm not doing another show. He was the bass player. I was a guitarist. And he's like, I'm not doing another show like that. But then we got the opportunity to play the Cat's Cradle. I'm like, wow, the Cat's Cradle. Oh my God, we're going to play the Cat's Cradle. And then I think Dan said, why don't we just do it improv? I said, well, we never practice. How are we going to improv if we never practice? He was like, and Franz was like, I would do that. Yeah, let's just do that. So we just went to the Cat's Cradle with no song. We just played like shit for half an hour until they threw us off. That was the last time we ever played. But yeah, so I'm sure Franz just blocked it out of his memory. Probably not a good time, but he was an interesting guy for sure. Yeah.
I used to hang out at there was a record store called Roots over right in Carrboro that he worked at, but it was like they wouldn't get stuff that you really wanted. They would always get stuff that was like remaindered or cut out. But I would hang out there, and I would kind of just pester him, and I was writing a lot of reviews, and he was the music director, and so I was kind of like, I didn't have a title, but I was kind of like an assistant to him, and so we would debate or talk about stuff, and I remember I was griping about all the alt country being just kind of like just sometimes the put on that some of these groups would they would make it sound like, they grew up on the farm or something, and instead or like it's so hard, and the Zip Code Review did a great kind of parody of that with that doctors are spreading disease but anyway I was complaining to Franz about all this, the subject matter of the song. I'm not even sure what band, just some vague idea, and he said, well, what do you want him to sing about? Can you imagine a country song about email? How bad that would be, and or something that just stuck in my mind. That's the kind of stuff we would talk about.
There's rumors floating around, bad faith all over town, and liars and lawyers everywhere. They snort out pollution instead of seeking solutions. Injustice is getting so hard to bear. Doctors are spreading disease. How much blood can you squeeze?
But that was definitely like formative. Just 2 years at XYC, but I learned a lot, and I'm conscious of the fact that I was irritating as hell, as most of us were, I think, in college, with all of our strong, it's not just your taste in music, but at least,
how
your
much
sense of,
you felt.
You felt that.
I remember getting so upset all the time about the shit they play on the radio when there's so much good music I like. Like, why can't the Thinking Fellows be on the radio? They should be the millionaires. It shouldn't be this crap, this U2 and all this crap. I felt so strongly about music. But I was actually, I will give myself credit for this and my group of friends. We were all thrilled and very excited and proud when Nirvana made it big. Like each week we were watching the album go up the charts more and more. We couldn't believe it. And I remember one night Tim Ross came out and said to us at dinner, Nevermind is number one. We were like, holy shit, one of our bands is on top of the chart. So that was very exciting because we all like Bleach, and when this came out, we kind of just didn't expect this, and then it got on MTV, and I don't know, and we all knew that it was like mixed different, but it was one of our bands, and it felt like after that it felt like anything could happen. We thought Pavement could be huge. We thought, of course, Mudhoney could be huge. Of course, none of that happened, but it was
instead we got Bush and Creed. Well, that was later.
It was weird because when I was in high school, I started listening to the grunge show on my local station, and it was music that in your head you think of as grungy, dirty, like early Mudhoney and early Nirvana, and Tad, and then the AMRAP stuff like the Cows and Helmet and all this stuff that's just like grungy and dirty sounding. And then Pearl Jam came out, and suddenly grunge meant something totally different. So grunge, the meaning of grunge just changed dramatically because Nevermind was so slick, and then Pearl Jam, and then Soundgarden was playing like heavy metal. So it was heavy. I don't know. At any rate, I guess what I called grunge at the time is now called noise rock. I think it changes all the time, but I think so.
I didn't start at UNC until 1995, August of 95, and I didn't start at this radio station until my junior year. I think you were already out of Chapel Hill by the time I started.
Yeah. I left at the beginning of 96, January 96, I left.
Okay. So we were 4.5 year.
Well, let me see. I graduated in 3.5 years. So I stopped doing, my last show on XYC was probably December 94. And then I stuck around in town for a year, hanging out with my girlfriend and just working crap jobs until I could convince my brother to move to New York with me. So that's when I finally moved up in January 96. But my years on XYC were the end of 91 through the end of 94.
And then your years in Chapel Hill, were they 91 to 95?
91 to, yeah.
Okay, yeah. So there was definitely overlap.
We were probably at some of the same shows near my end, and
maybe, yeah. Although I was pretty clueless with certain things, and in terms of like local, I really missed the glory days of when Chapel Hill was briefly considered the next Seattle, if it ever was. That kind of stuff.
Yeah.
With XYC, did you always just do a regular show, or did you do specialty shows there?
I did a regular show, and I also helped out on the show called Into the Ground. Did you ever hear of Into the Ground? It was kind of not a takeoff, but it was along the similar lines of Negative Land's Over the Edge. So we took over the edge into the ground. I joined, I think they started that show during a summer when I was at home in Georgia. But when I came back, they introduced me to it and let me join. So I was in the background on that show doing a bunch of sound effects and recording stuff on tape and playing it back and things. And I did a couple of shows, like one-time shows. I don't know if it was like once a week they would have like a 3-hour slot where someone could, I don't remember what it was called, but it was once a week. There's a 3-hour slot, like maybe Wednesdays from 8 to 11 or something, where people did what's a special thing. Like I did one about the Ramones, and one time I did one where I pretended that XYC had been turned into a classic rock station. So I played just classic rock crap, and I had all these fake commercials for it saying things like, I changed the name of the station to Power 89. And it said stuff like I had all repeat Tuesdays. If you hear anything that's not Pink Floyd, Led Zeppelin, or the Eagles, we'll give you $10,000. Crap like that. People would call in with their classic rock requests, and that was pretty funny. It was terrible because I would sneak. I also, you have to play the stuff that's in rotation. So I kept doing that. I would throw like this African thing into the middle of Steely Dan and the Cars and Supertramp, and I just pretend like it was classic rock. I don't know. It was pretty fun.
I thought you got an exemption during those shows. That might have been the Thursday night feature, if that's
That was it. Thursday
yeah.
night feature. Oh wait,
Hindsight.
you know what? No, I'm sorry. I don't think I did that as a Thursday night feature. I think I just
Oh.
did my show as that. That's why I kept playing the rotation, so I wouldn't get in trouble. The Ramones was a Thursday night feature though, for sure.
Okay, yeah. There was one time right at the very end before I moved away, I was going to do one on Amarillo Records, but it was double booked. And oddly enough, the other person who was doing the show that night was Dan Partridge from
Oh yeah, Pine State.
Pine State. Yeah.
That's great, but do you have anything to say about Pine State?
Caller, are you more?
I think Pine State sucks. Well, that's enough for you, caller. Thanks a lot.
You were at that show at the Duke Coffee House that was Zip Code Rapists and U.S.
Yeah.
Saucer and Pine
Yes.
State.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that was great. You know, I knew Greg Turkington. I knew the name from Zip Code Rapists, and at the time, my girlfriend, who then later became my wife and then became my ex-wife, she lived with Charlie Spate, and I'm pretty sure that day I walked into their house and I saw Greg Turkington sitting on their couch. That was before I knew him, before I'd met him, but I'm pretty sure. So I think he was hanging out with Charlie Spate before that show for a long time. But that's not the point. The point is that Zip Code Rapists were hilarious. I actually later got to sing a song on stage with them many years later during one of their reunions, like maybe 5-8 years ago, something like that. I got to go up on stage and sing "Wake Me Up Before You Go Go" with Greg. It was very fun.
Their music, actually, you were aware of their music through
the radio station.
Okay.
Yeah, and also I knew Neil Hamburger because of the great. Well, you know what? Working on that show, Into the Ground, they made up a bunch of carts where they could put in voices to make it sound like there were a lot of people in the studio. And one of the ones they used was no, Neil Hamburger, no. So that was where I first heard of them, from working on that show. And then they told me, oh, it's from this Prank Phone Calls album. And so I learned about Neil Hamburger from that. And I got to tell you, it was a prank phone call. That was it. I mean, and then later a single came out. And I was like, oh my God, he put out a single. This is great. A Neil Hamburger single.
Yeah, I went to see my shrink the other day. I said, Doc, what can I do? My career is miserable. He says, Neil, what you got to do is pay your bills. Until you pay me what you owe me, I can't help you with any further psychiatric treatment. A funny man. But things aren't just crazy for me. Things are crazy everywhere. And not just here in Fort Lauderdale either. Do we have any locals in the audience?
So to watch it go from that to an actual, basically a career, was pretty amazing. And he just got funnier and funnier and funnier.
Yeah, Dan actually brought the CD the first Drag City CD, and it was the sight gag bit, the naked hot dog
Oh
vendor.
yeah.
I was doing my show, and he was just in the station, and he brought that up, and I was just kind of wondering, what is this?
There's an office party on my floor, and I'd planned to go there, but I died. I'd made up lots of egg salad, which I hoped everyone would really like. Most folks won't eat an egg salad. It's been made by someone who's now dead. I hope that you'll have some with your Coke.
People who don't, I guess, get, not that there's much to get, but people who don't think the zip code rapists are funny think that they're missing something. You're like, I just don't get it. I don't. It just, you either think it's funny or you don't. That's basically it. It's not some deep concept behind the zip code rapists.
Darling, don't you go and cut your hair. Do you think it's gonna make him change?
Did you come across that Matador Records thing when it came out?
Yes. And another, that was great. That was wonderful because at the time I absolutely loved, and still do actually love Pavement and the Thinking Fellers. I now like that Liz Phair album. It took many, many years for me to finally like it. But yeah, I think I was introduced to the Zip Code Rapist by my friend Jeff Robbins, who worked on Into the Ground. When I came up from my junior year, a friend of mine had gotten us an apartment, but it wasn't ready for us yet. So Jeff let me stay at his house for a few days. And I saw that album, the first Zip Code Rapist album. And I was like, what the hell is that? And he introduced me to it. And then from there, that single came in. Then later the 94124 EP came out. And boy, the funniest though was when I don't know, I know I ordered them from Greg. I ordered those, the follow-up bands records, and I got that Three Doctors one with that insert explaining the story of how they broke up. Oh, I was laughing, and like tears were in my eyes laughing at that. It was so funny. Greg was talking about, all of Greg's comments were, yeah, he's just doing it for the money. We're doing it for the love of the music. You know, we're gonna move forward and do new things. And then the album was just a bunch of shitty covers.
I envision you as naked. Is that why you're so scared? Your body's turning on my body.
I saw in your book that quote from Greg, which I'd never heard, about how he asked, was it the drummer of Flipper? The guitarist of Flipper. He asked, should I do heroin? Right? Something like that?
Yeah, I think he asked something about that. And yeah, Bruce told me that.
Greg actually asked me. I mean, he just came up to me in a way with some training. He said, is it worth even trying drugs, Bruce? And I said, no. I just went, no, don't do it. Forget it.
Greg got into the scene when he was so young.
Yeah, I mean, think about, when I was 16, I could list so much embarrassing stuff I did, pretty much everything I did. pretty much all the music I listened to was pretty bad, but because he moved up there in like 83 and he was still in high school, and he's interning at Subterranean while he's going to high school, sort of.
The one thing I don't know is, I know he's from Arizona originally, right?
Yeah.
Did he like leave home, or did his family move?
I think his parents were already separated, and his dad was living in San Francisco. So that's why they all ended up working for that Eventually,
the chemical company, right?
The chemical company. Although and it does get named, but I think enough time has passed at this point. There was in the past where he didn't want it to be named, but it was like you could figure out the name.
Yeah.
But I was able to interview, Margaret, John Singer, Brandon, the kind of the whole almost the whole crew there, and I think it's safe to say that the only other thing on the internet would have been what you had there from with Brandon, as far as the hashtag lore. I mean, but and these stories, and I would get way too excited about stuff like hearing about their playing darts and listening to Ride a Rock Horse.
Yeah. Have you seen the book? They had this book, a notebook with a bunch of cartoons and things they'd drawn and written that they let me borrow once. It was just a bunch of stuff like who was the guy from Wings that died while he was sitting in his chair? It was all this stuff about poor whatever this guy's name was, poor Jimmy McCullough or whoever it was, poor Jimmy McCullough dead in his chair. There'd be a picture there. Yeah, I heard a lot of stories. The only problem is it was like 20 years ago, so I don't remember any of them. See, Brandon used to live in the Bronx while I was living in Manhattan. So when Greg would visit, that's how I met Brandon, through Greg.
Okay.
Greg visited, but whenever I was with them, I would ask questions and they would just regale me with hilarious stories. And I remember, have you heard this? I'm sure you've heard this. I don't even know why I'm asking, but the Yellow River Boys. Okay, that's it's basically a bunch of classic rock songs about piss clubs. Right. Clubs where people go and piss all over each other. And that's something like I remember back when I was first hanging out with these guys, they would talk about, in San Francisco back in the 80s, they would have piss clubs where you put, plastic wrap all over the floor. They just pee on each other. And I was like, you're lying. You're making this up. But apparently they continued telling the stories because Greg made a whole album of songs about it with Tim Heidecker.
Okay, I didn't know. Here's me. I didn't even know Greg was involved in that. I thought that was just a Tim Heidecker thing.
Oh no, he wrote wrote all the songs together. Greg sings one of the songs, but it's very funny. You should hear it. But it just like these stories. I still don't know if there was such thing as Piss Club, but they're sure acting like there was.
Yeah, even if there's nobody around to appreciate it, but me. Shit on the fucking plate.
I don't know what kind of digging is involved in finding that, like if that's the diamond in the rough, what else? What is the rough?
Yeah.
But having access to these
you
things.
Could just go to YouTube.
You could just go to YouTube. Yeah. And so if you knew somebody who had this stuff, that's one thing. But then if there was somebody who actually had like firsthand, they know the people who are making these tapes, or they know how to get trading these tapes, and it is kind of mythical stuff. And it always seemed like Greg, in particular, would have like, whether it's vanity pressings or song poem stuff, and they're just
right. That's where I heard of all that stuff. It was all through Greg. All the when I was getting into quote weird music, it's like, are you familiar with industrial musicals? And I was like, no, I don't know what industrial musicals are. So he introduced me to those.
And today, Denton is out ahead of the pack.
From 1967.
The most unusual city of its size in the nation. Yes, I say city.
They want you to move to Denton, Texas. They need you there! Come to Denton.
How about song poems? Tell me about song poems.
You better hold on to that love. Hold on to that love. You better hold on to that love, 'cause the world is a jungle. You better hold on.
Yeah, so and he introduced me to those records. I have several of them, those awful sex records where it just all sounds violent and it's just people like, I'm gonna fuck you dog style, blah blah blah. These Audio Stag, I think, was the label. Audio Stag.
Okay, well, it was good to see you today, and please... Oh, wait, I also have The Lustful Sex Life of a Perverted Nympho Housewife. How did this get in my collection? This is unbelievable. Okay, let's see if there's anything really enjoyable on here.
Hey, what about the cheeks of my ass? Yeah. Hey, honey. Oh, that's great. Now lick my sweaty balls.
Sorry, I was able to keep a straight face the entire time until that one.
Like the sound of a bed squeaking, it sounds like they're making it by taking a metal table, and just scraping the legs on the ground. So it's just like.
Hi, I'm Mark Prindle from the Mark Prindle Institute of Technology, and today, I really love symphony music. So I thought I'd buy this one, Erotica by the Bedspring Symphony. Let's give it a listen. Hear the bassoon?
That he introduced me to that. He introduced me to that. I think it was stuff, but on the same label. There was one about everything you needed, everything you ever wanted to know about, and then a band or everything you wanted. But I can't remember what the band was because it was so long ago. But there were a couple of them, and the record label owner was paying the writers by the word, so they just wrote as much as they could. So if you listen to it, it's just somebody talking as fast as they can. So it's just like, it's like everything you ever wanted to know about the Partridge Family, whoever it was. And then you listen to it, and it's just someone going, the Partridge Family were formed in 1968. 1969 was the first record of the
Yeah, they were breezy, funny, articulate. Their press conferences were entertaining, big news, and everyone came. Terry wants desperately to feel that his press conferences, the one in which Grand Funk finally consented to meet the press after 2 years and told the world it intended to fill Shea Stadium like the Beatles had,
for like 40 minutes. Again, just he got me. I mean, I had heard samples from the Flight FINAL record. You know that one?
Here, listen. This is the beginning.
Ladies and gentlemen, this is Paul Evangel speaking to you from the terminal of life near the gate of death, where along with many others we will shortly be boarding the Interworld Airlines flight FINAL for the New Jerusalem. This is the very first time that anyone in broadcasting has been given the authority to actually witness and describe the flight of a departed soul and relay the information so that you can hear, experience, and prepare yourself for this heavenly journey.
Was that an inspiration for the Golding Institute?
No, but the Golding Institute is genius.
You know, it is not impossible to be in a slumber so deep you will never wake up. A slumber so comfortable you will never tell anyone about it. A sleep so deep that it could only take place in a graveyard or an urn.
Do you have any issues of Breakfast Without Meat?
He let me read them.
Okay.
He lent them to me a long time ago. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, because I would go through the charts and those, and even when I would go back to them like 5 years later, I'd realize, oh, that was in there too, and I'd seen it, or some other record that he would put out, I would see, oh, he did that, and that connects back to this thing.
Look, I'm not bigoted.
Yes, you are.
You can be a bigot from all sides. You can be a bigot against people, or you can be a bigot against comedy. You know, I think what I'm doing up here is comedy, and I think it should be heard.
You can be a bigot from all sides. You can be a bigot against blacks. You can be a bigot against music, you know? I think what we're doing up here is music. I think it should be heard.
I don't know. I met him, I guess, shortly after, or started conversing with him shortly after the second Neil Hamburger album came out. So this was before my time. So I don't know what instigated it, but he was never, it seems like he was never afraid of not being cool. I mean, on one side, he's hanging out with the guys in Flipper, and on the other side, he's raving about this woman who inherited money from the Dixie Cup company and put out these, and I listened to him. I bought a couple of their albums.
Hall.
They're horrible. Yeah. They are horrible records.
From north, south, east,
West, you've got a ticket for Once Upon a Tour. And now, let's move across the land to meet the swingin' singing man, Mr. Phil Harris. The happy now sound of Frank Sinatra Jr. A gold record, a boy and his guitar, Oliver. The human carbon copy, the impressionable Rick Little. The man with the mobile face that stops all traffic, Ben Blue. That huge hunk of happiness, Rosie Greer. And introducing Miss Dora Hall. Here we are, Hollywood.
Dora Hall. I mean, I can understand the Frank Sinatra Jr. thing. I bought a couple of his albums. I'm not a fan of that kind of music, but I know Greg is. He likes Frank Sinatra and that kind of thing. But Dora Hall is just, it's hard to listen to.
Greg also had the ability to enjoy very, very sad, disastrous attempts at commercial success. So Dora Hall, for instance, wanted to be a vaudeville comedian, an actress, singer, and Solo Cups would put out these things. I'm sure you know all that, but he could somehow make it funny, whereas to me it seemed very tragic. I don't know if I thought that the failure that it embodied was contagious or just depressing.
These aren't necessarily things you're going to put on in your car on the way to work, but they have this effect on you where there's something off about it, and you don't know what to make of it, and you look at the people who made the record and you say, well, what were they thinking when they made the record?
Yeah.
And sometimes those kind of things end up being meaningful, whereas the latest band that is being that's being praised as the critics' darling. It's sometimes it's just, even if they are good, it's just hard to have that kind of relationship or sense of connection to it.
Yeah, it's too slick, or it's too obvious in the sense that, the tunes are really good, but they go exactly where you expect them to go. The guy has a great voice, but he's just kind of, I understand what you're saying. And that's part of, I'm sure, what attracted Greg to things like song poems, where you listen to people singing songs that they have no vested interest in at all. They're just doing them as quickly as they can to get them done. And then you have like one guy who's trying to be an artist about it, that Rod Keefe. He's trying to do something, better if he can.
For this, that you smile, this warm secret dial gives ring to the bells of my eyes.
I don't know. Maybe I thought Rod Keith's were really interesting, some of them, but just
I got way into that stuff.
Yeah,
you start to imagine the backstory of what kind of person sent these lyrics and what their hopes and dreams or delusions.
Noblemen die in white wigs when undertakers refuse to dig, and when cocksure heroes massacre innocent, curious people who underrate the power of human absurdity. Malicious snobs, seeming rich, handling the brush to the witch.
The stuff I took for granted when I was growing up as the way things are, it turns out that no, that was actually this pretty specific slice of time that I
mean, it's been good and bad for a music lover like me. It's been good in the sense that I can find anything I want. I can find anything I want to hear now. I found a Bean Church cassette online recently, and then it was great. I'd never heard an album by them before, but it's bad in the sense that you can't make a living on music anymore. You just can't, because everything is available everywhere. There's always going to be someone posting your shit on SoulSeek or on their blog or whatever. So it did. I mean, I really hate to say this, but Lars was right. He was right the whole time that this was going to ruin the music industry, because there's no way. And it's not just the record companies' failure to figure it out. It's just the technology. I mean, back then it would take you all night to download an album. Now you can download an album in like 10 seconds. It's as if somebody posts it, and they always do, then thousands of people can download it and not pay for it. I can't remember what year it was, but there was one year that I went to a new hamburger show, and somebody from Comedy Central's record company was there, and we went out for dinner to eat, and he said, the record industry is dying. And I was like, what do you mean? He said, it's because of downloading, that they're letting people go. They're not able to pay bands, this and that. It's just, and at the time I still couldn't quite see it, because CDs were still selling like hotcakes, but he was right on the money, and technology just got better and better. And my God, if I like an album, then I want to buy the album, or I want to buy the CD. I'm still in that old frame of mind, which drives my wife crazy. She's like, why do you still buy CDs when you can listen to the music online? And I'm like, I don't know. I want to pay to, so like Guided by Voices. I love Guided by Voices. I'll buy everything they put out. I like supporting them. They're one of the few bands that I really love that's still around. But there are a lot of bands, new bands, who they can't afford or realize there's probably no point in making a CD. So they just put their music digital, and I'm just not going to pay for digital music. I just don't. It's easy enough to find it free somewhere, and then if I like it, like I like this band. Most people don't, but Dig Low Abortions, their new album, I downloaded it, for free. Love it. I want to buy it. I have all their other stuff, but I couldn't find the CD anywhere. And I emailed the singer and said, hey, are you actually selling copies of this on CD? And he said, well, we made a few to sell at shows. It's going to be out on vinyl in a while. Watch for that. And I was like, well, I hope so, because I got it for free. I want to pay for it, but you know what I mean? Well, let me see. I'll just say a couple of things then, if I can help to finish. I can say this. I'll say Flipper were geniuses. By gum, I was late to the game, of course, but in like 92, I was in a record store in Georgia, Athens, Georgia. I was visiting my friend who went to Athens, to UGA, and I found in a dollar bin, Flipper, generic album Flipper. And I'd heard of Flipper, but had spent no time with them. And I said, well, for $1, how can I turn that down? And it just blew my mind how amazingly good it was. I mean, the music could be depressing, but the words were sort of uplifting in a way. And it was just, so I listened to it over and over again. And then of course I had to get the rest of their stuff. And they were doing something that nobody else was doing. And you can say like, oh, but then they led into the Melvins and they did, but I don't even know that they did. All I know is that they had bass lines that you could not get out of your head, two different singers or vocalists, whatever you want to call them, with very compelling voices and approaches, a guitarist who just made a bunch of noise. I mean, it was often not related to the song at all, it seemed like, but he played the same thing every time, I guess. And then the drummer would keep the beat. And I don't know, it sounded so slack in one sense, so like sprawling and slack, but the songs were just great songs. And then I'll say that Greg Turkington I had, at this point, the second Neil Hamburger album had come out, the Raw Hamburger, and I emailed Amarillo Records to order some stuff, and he answered, and I said, "Are you Neil Hamburger?" And he responded, "Well, if I was, I wouldn't tell you." So that's how our friendship started. So, and then I finally got to meet him when he came to town, opening for Trans Am. And I went up and I met him, and I was talking to Greg, like, "Hey, Greg, how you doing?" Blah, blah, blah. And he said, "Well, I need to get ready for the show." And then he came on stage looking like Neil Hamburger, which I just thought was hilarious. I was not expecting it, So I don't know. And I'll say this: that Greg, his acts have always been confrontational, whether it's Faxed Head or Zip Code Rapists or Neil Hamburger. He's always very confrontational, which is why he got a glass to the head. But he is one of the nicest and most genuinely good human beings that I know. I mean, this isn't saying anything. He's a vegan. That's not really saying anything. But what is saying something is that he's just a really genuinely good, nice guy who cares about people. It pisses him off when people are ripping other people off or being, he attacks people that he feels like deserve to be attacked in his acts. And Brandon Kearney is he's a very, the word sardonic comes to mind, but I don't know if that's the right word. He can be very negative sounding, but like Greg, he is just a very good human being. I don't know. I think both of them are more Christian than most Christians. They're just very good people. So I get to say that.
Thank you again to Mark Prindle for doing this interview. For more of his writing, as always, you can go to markprindle.com, and for more on the book, go to whocaresanyway.online or headpress.com.
psychiatrist about this problem. Yeah, that would probably be for the best.